Hi everybody, I'm Phil Fatica. Welcome back to the Millcreek Government Channel. It's always a great pleasure for us to have you with us. Let me introduce you to our guest today. This is Mark Amendola, and I know you know him because I know you know the organization that he works for. Mark Amendola, you work for Perseus House. You are the executive director, and you started there just a couple of years ago, and you've been taking it in new directions ever since. Thanks for coming and being with us.
Sure, thank you for having me.
Okay, Mark's been with Perseus House since 1994, but Perseus House started in 1971, so it's been around. Perseus House, unusual name. Why the name?
Perseus, actually out of Greek mythology, slew Medusa, after going after Andromeda. Ironically, the programs were originally named Perseus House for the strength of that character. And the male programs were Perseus, the female programs were Andromeda.
Okay.
Came in 1994 and thought, not too sure about that name. We actually did some focus groups and people recognized the name. Yeah. So we decided not to change the name, but change the brand. Okay. And so that's what we did.
What do you do? What's Perseus' House mission?
Yeah, Perseus House really excels in comprehensive care for kids and families. We focus on kids in our residential programs, but work with families. We believe strongly that the answer to not all, but some of the problems that we're experiencing right now is with lives within families. And if we can get families to really be able to raise their children and do it in a way that is helpful in terms of moving on to whatever that next stage is, that'll be helpful to everybody.
Let me take the reverse of that. Sure. Why haven't families been engaged? What caused the uncoupling?
Yeah, I think there's a number of different reasons for that. If I think of when I grew up, intact family, whatever that means, parent, mother and father at home. Father worked, mother was able to stay at home. Large family, 6 siblings, but we all were able to do what we needed to do. Everybody was educated, went to college, working in high school. Now it's different, economically. A lot of single-parent families depend, and that's not a criticism. It is the nature of what we do. Yeah. Depend on what you look like. Research you look at up to 50, 60%. Intact families, both parents working. I never had to worry about letting myself in the house at 3 o'clock with a key, making sure that I ate my dinner. So some of those basic custodial needs, kids are taking care of themselves more and more nowadays. Yeah. So there's a lot of different things. If we think of culture, if we think of media, there's just so many things that fit into that equation.
You have a pretty broad reach. You've got a pretty big plate. You can start from the middle and go out, or you can start from the ends and come in, any way you'd like to describe it, because you've got a big reach.
Sure. On the Perseus House side, Perseus House, we have 96 residential beds, and they range from, we provide shelter for Erie County, we have male and female mental health programs, we have intensive treatment programs with kids that have had problems with delinquency, and we have volunteer mental health programs, so kids that actually would be paid by a third-party payer, by an insurance company, would actually then provide treatment. Within that program, we provide therapy, individual group therapy, family therapy, and within a specified amount of time, and really try to get kids better than when they walked in the door, and families to be able to live and survive and really be healthy with each other.
Let's take Phil. How does Phil get to have your services? What would Phil and Phil's family, or Phil, whoever's taking care of Phil, how do we get to you?
Yeah, there's basically 2 doors on the residential side. There are court-ordered children that would go to court, potentially be adjudicated delinquent or dependent, and then would end up in one of our programs as a result of a judge ordering that. And then there is on the volunteer side, where a family would be looking for specific treatment, and then through their MCO, whatever that third payer was, they would then choose us. So it really is consumer choice.
MCO meaning?
Managed care company, so your Highmark, Value Behavioral Health, whatever insurance company may provide the health care for that family.
As I said a little earlier, the Perseus House has been around since 1971. You've been with them since 1994. What's changed? Your services are much more in demand. The cases have become tougher. It's not gotten better? It's gotten worse? Any way you want to go there. That's a
Sure.
really broad, open-ended
Sure, it
question.
is. Yeah, Perseus House started in 1971 with a grant from the Vickery Foundation, and really started with the original director, the founder, Steve McDermott, who lived in a facility with his family and the kids. And the basic mission has not driven so far from that, which was that if we take these kids who have trouble in the community at home, give them a home family-like environment, teach them skills, teach them competencies, and then can they return back to that environment and be successful? Yeah. So it has not moved so much. There has been clearly kids that walk into the door are much more multi-complex. There's many more problems that kids and families are experiencing. Trauma, as an example, we see kids that have multi-complex traumas as they walk in the door. So loss, abuse, you can make that list however long you want to make that list, and it's become much more multi-problematic than it has 20 to 25 years ago.
As we're taping the show, one of the stories in the news has been deaths of children caused by the parents, or at least the people. And that becomes, I think most people's mind just go, how can you possibly kill a 2-month-old or something of that nature? I mean, what is it in you that caused you to just completely lose control? So you would try to get to these people before that happens, before, I mean, it makes the headlines and it makes the going to prison and it makes the you should be killed because you killed somebody else. I mean, is there any kind of an intervention that is in place for people at that level? There
is, and we do try on the prevention side that as when we begin to see kids with certain behaviors, truancy, beginning to experiment with drugs and alcohol, those kind of indicators, we know that there may be some skills that they need to learn. On the deeper end, kids that have experienced more problems, we use evidence-based practices. As an example, we use evidence-based practice called aggression replacement training. And aggression replacement training has volumes of research behind it that looks at kids that have experienced problems with social skills, aggression, clearly teach the difference between anger and aggression to kids. All emotions are okay. Anger is an emotion. Aggression is a behavior that clearly creates problems for kids.
Bullying?
But bullying is a huge issue and starts at a very young age. You know, we typically have zero tolerance for aggressive behavior in high schools. We contend that if we had zero tolerance of low levels of aggression early on in elementary school, such as bullying, not that boys will be boys, but we really address that early on, because what happens if it's not dealt with, kids begin to learn that it works for them and that it works over and over and over. Something may happen, but they may get away with it, and so that just leads to higher levels of aggression. Inherent in your question also is where does it come from? So there are some genetic predisposition. There's a lot of research out there that tells us that we give our kids certain things. You know, we genetically give our kids, certain attributes, but also we know that it is a learned behavior. So environmentally, if kids grow up in an environment where they are exposed to violence, either to themselves or indirectly that they witness it, then that can create some of these behaviors also.
Speaking of violence, as you're talking, I'm writing down notes here. It would appear that some of the video games, it would appear that the hiding behind the tweeting or the bullying, the anonymous bullying, is extremely aggressive. I mean, there's threats made against people's lives, and they can hide behind that. We don't know who I am. How do you get around that?
There's a lot of questions that you just asked.
When you're looking at an Xbox 360 and you're saying, I want this for Christmas and I want Halo or whatever the game is that's very violent, what do you do? Say, I'm going to get you Mario Brothers or something? Yeah.
Let's go back to my earlier comments. It really lies within parents setting boundaries.
Yeah.
Kids need limits and boundaries. There is research out there from the University of Indiana that says that when kids are playing first-person shooting video games, that the part of the brain that shuts down is the frontal lobe. So the part of the brain that actually has to deal with reasoning and thinking and problem solving actually shuts down. Now, there's adult gamers that just are fine in terms of their problem-solving abilities, but somebody early on with that child has to teach that child that that is fantasy, that is a game. It's not the real way to problem solve. Let's go back to the bullying question. Unfortunately, times have changed. 20 years ago, if you were bullied in school, typically, unless that child lived right next door to you, the bullying stopped. Now, as you said, it's 24/7, and that's really unfortunate because that creates extreme stress for kids. Also, if we think of social media and technology, we see kids that are communicating in a different manner. You know, the fact is, you know, think of when, you know, just direct communication. There are things that I see either in electronically that if somebody was speaking to somebody eye to eye, just like we're doing right now, that it's very possible that communication may not have been as aggressive or as mean-spirited as we see it. So there clearly, and it is what we have right now, it's what we got to deal with, but it is a factor clearly in escalating some of these higher levels of aggression.
Wow. That doesn't sound like a whole lot of good news, though. Again, go back to, is the ripple from the center moving at about the same approximate rate as when you started, or is the ripple getting faster and wider?
It feels like it's getting faster and wider. However, Stephen Pinker, who does a lot of research on aggression, has researched recently that we are at the lowest level of aggression in mankind right now. Right now. However, we don't feel that or see that because why? On the news, we see it repeated over and over and over and over. On social media, kids are watching, kids have exposure, kids see it kids are being exposed to levels of aggression at an age much earlier than they ever have. So I'm going to go back to some of my earlier comments, which is that there has to be some limit set. There has to be some boundaries. You know, there has to be someone in that child's life that is going to say, these are the limits that are set. These are how we're going to follow them, and this is the way that it is. Maybe
structured more towards male than female. I'm not sure, and I don't want to make this a sexist question, but sports and the aggression that is associated with that, especially in football, and maybe many of the games. You know, I mean, the outright meaning to hurt somebody, as opposed to playing the game fairly.
Clearly, one more variable that fits into, you know, Sunday afternoon, people that watch NFL, it's so highly aggressive, and it is encouraged, it is enabled, and so it's over. It's those repetitive images over and over and over. The other concern that I have is that it also begins to desensitize. Even people that see this on a daily basis, it begins to desensitize them to what's happening in their environments. We hear about something happening on the street, and somebody turns, instead of saying and or doing something, turns around and walks the other way. We become as a culture desensitized to these images because it's just as a matter of fact.
Right.
We should be horrific, it's a horrific image, and we should be actually just thinking about what are we going to do about that, and yet it's just as a matter of fact.
On the national news just the other day, on the morning talk shows especially, they had this video of these girls beating on this other girl in a McDonald's. I don't know, I didn't catch where it was, but nobody intervened. But somebody's thought enough to, and I left my cell phone sometime, take out the cell phone and video it, and then put it online somewhere so you can watch this happening.
Amazing. Absolutely.
That is, my jaw drops on that. Nobody helped, but they could take the time to shoot it and then post it.
And so that's the culture, that's the environment that we're living in.
And you deal with that?
We do, we do deal with it. So we explain to kids, that it's not a normal way to problem solve. It's not how you problem solve in an assertive manner. It's eventually going to lead to some kind of path that's not going to be good for you. And we also work with families to help families understand that it is your role to parent your child. And clearly understanding that families have problems. You know, there are problems that occur within families, but yet it's their responsibility to take care.
Interesting. We'll come back. Now, I know that you do have the Charter School of Excellence, and that's a separate component, but yet still under the same general umbrella.
It is.
What is that? What's
the Charter School of Excellence is a public school. It is a separate entity. It has a separate board. It is underneath the same mandates that every public school in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania have to follow. We have 3 sites. We have 600 kids right now that are enrolled. We have a site that is our leadership site at 1511 Peach Street, and those are primarily the original cohort of our kids, which started in 2002, the kids that are more than 2 years behind academically and really need to beef it up for credit recovery to graduate. Their goal is to graduate. We have a site at Level Place.
Offer accredited courses, and their diploma is as valid as anybody else's.
Commonwealth of Pennsylvania diploma.
And puts a stamp of approval.
And our curriculum has to be approved by PDE.
Would this be because, I can look back on this and say that not everybody really wants that school that everybody else used to have? I mean, people fit into different notches when they go to school. Times, for example. Most studies indicate that teenagers are not awake at 7:20 in the morning.
As an example, a great example. So why do we start high school at 7:30 and elementary school at 8:45? it probably should be flipped the other way.
Sure it should.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt about that. We have at Level Place, we have a site that's called our Skill Center that has a culinary arts program, a work experience program, a graphic design program. We have kids that are in a college prep classes. So we are able to provide different levels for kids that are really, depending on what their needs are and what their career path is. And we have a middle school that has 6th, 7th, and 8th grade and really is preparing kids to move to whatever their high school decision might be.
And do they understand too that not everybody should be going to college?
That's
I mean, you know,
correct.
everybody doesn't need to major in European art history. Somebody needs to major in building this desk, you know, building that floor, putting those lights in, making that camera work. I mean, you know, there's dignity in work.
Yeah, we, as an example, why we have our culinary arts program, because of the Erie market, what is out there in terms of Erie from a business point of view. So we have an articulation agreement with Mercius Northeast that kids can actually earn up to 18 credits towards a certificate in culinary arts, and so it really helps. One of the original mission of the Charter School of Excellence was to get kids to graduate. We saw these group of kids in Erie, Pennsylvania that were not graduating. And so we've achieved that, we've done that. But about 5 or 6 years ago, kids were coming back to us and saying, we're finding minimum wage jobs. We're working at McDonald's, we're working at Burger King, and literally those minimum wage jobs are at the poverty level. So we went back to the state and said we'd like to develop a work program that would have this potential for college prep if somebody was interested. And so now what we're doing, it really is work readiness. So while they are in school, we are preparing them to be able to, and they may even, out of those 600 kids, about 150 kids are working at some level. So they're working while they're in school, earning their credits, really preparing them how to be to work on time, how to work within a team, how to communicate, how to problem solve, so that by the time they're really getting to their job, they're prepared for that job.
Good.
At a higher level, it's not just a minimum wage job.
Yeah, yeah. There's so many things to discuss about what Mark does. Again, this is Mark Amendola. He is the executive director of Perseus House, and also you're in charge of the Charter School of Excellence. So you wear many hats, of course, but those 2 big ones. Again, I guess the best practice trends in your field, can you be specific as to what they are? Because
sure.
I know there's so many, but take 25.
Sure. Aggression is a big one for us because the level that we see at a variety of different levels, verbal, physical, relational, we're seeing more and more relational aggression, particularly with younger kids.
Male to female, female to female, male to male, doesn't matter.
A combination of, but it's more a triangulation is what it is. So 3 third graders are in one of our elementary programs, and there are 2 of them that are going to sleep over one kid's house on Saturday night. The one child, and from the other child is going to say, hey, I'm sleeping over Phil's house Saturday night, you're not staying. So, not with lifting a hand, but again, with intent to hurt, with intent to harm. We're seeing more of that. And the combination of it is just as you described.
I could assume safely that this has no color, no nationality, no, it's across the board.
Cuts across demographics.
Yeah.
It cuts right
through demographics. It doesn't matter whether you're rich, poor, white, black, pink, orange, yellow, green, left-handed, right-handed, brown-eyed, blue-eyed, green-eyed.
You are absolutely correct.
Yeah.
And when we think of aggression, it's not just aggressive behavior. It is social skill deficiencies. It is the ability to deal with group pressure. It is the ability to use self-control. It is the ability to prepare for a stressful conversation. So there are multiple components that we use. We use problem solving, we use anger control, we use social skills. We have a character ed component that really challenges the level of character in terms of understanding where a kid's at and saying, this is why it is important to be truthful within your relationships. We use empathy. One of the best practice strategies out there is empathy training. And again, there's 2 schools of thought in terms of the research that we actually develop genetically predisposed to developing empathy. There's another school of thought that has to be taught. The fact is, by the time they get to us, we're teaching them what does it mean to be empathic and what does it mean to be considerate of other people's feelings that are in your lives. So the other one that really we see more and more is trauma, the exposure to trauma that kids and families are experiencing. And we use a model called trauma-focused cognitive behavioral treatment, and our therapists are trained in the model.
And trauma being defined as?
Multiple traumas, loss, a kid witnessing a homicide, physical, verbal abuse, anything that would expose a kid over a period of time to this extended stress. So we all may have experienced some trauma in our life. A car accident can be traumatic. But then how do you heal from that? And there are very specific best practice strategies to be able to heal from that.
What about medication? I would assume if you have a school where you have residential beds and there is a medication that will help people get over the, what's the feeling or what's the take on people? No, he'll be fine. I had it and I outgrew it and I look at how good I turned out.
Sure, and some of that may be true. That might be true. And we look at it from 2 points of view. Sometimes in a combination of medicine, it may be a temporary situation. It might be, and if we have situations where it might be more significant mental health issues, it might be a little bit more longer term. The issue, though, is it's not medication alone. It is a multidisciplinary team that looks at, it is counseling, it is medication, it is skill building, it is family work. So there's that combination of everything. Medication in and of itself, just like any other medication for health disorders, is to reduce symptoms. And so we want to get those symptoms down so that kids can be at a place where they can really address and problem solve to whatever the core problem might be.
You're describing Erie County. Could you just as well be describing anywhere?
We train all over the nation, and even though it might be the frequency and duration, it might be LA is bigger obviously and have more, the population is much denser, there is no doubt that it looks the same all over the United States of America.
And the world?
Yeah, there it does. There's no doubt. I would say that on the European side, they would tell us that they're probably about 10 years behind in terms of the level of aggression with adolescents. I mean, we see the level of terror is globally amazing. But when we're talking about kids and the work that we do, they feel they're about 10 years behind, but they're still seeing these increased higher levels of aggression. Absolutely.
Now, Dr. Amendola, put your finger on it. I know you said it, but why is this happening? Why? Is this unique to our history, or are we going through a cycle?
It is somewhat unique to our history. It is a little bit cyclical, and this is not the total answer, but a large lion's share of this lies within families. Where do kids begin to learn their belief systems? Where do they begin to learn how to problem solve? Where do they begin to learn how to develop interpersonal relationships? So that's why I go back to we work very strongly with the families. Now, the fact is, you know, some parents have kids and really struggle raising their kids. So there are times where we assess, is this child going to be able to go back to this family? And to answer that, maybe no, they cannot. So then we work really hard with the kid to be able to prepare them for adulthood, because that's what it's going to be.
I don't think I want your job. It just sounds a little bit too difficult. So let me ask you this. I ask this to a lot of people. When you go to work, what do you do?
Great question. I wear multiple hats. I am responsible for the entire operation, so I'm responsible for the budget. You know, our combined budgets are about $18 million. I'm responsible for the staff. We have close to 600 full and part-time staff. I am responsible for the overall programming, so I am responsible to make sure that the programming happens the way that we describe it. I am responsible for planning, so I am responsible for one of our strategic goals is to be involved in innovative and creative programming. Early on, in the mid-90s, programming was around developing innovative programming. We've done that. Now the goal is to maintain and sustain innovative programming.
You touched on one of the buzzwords I wanted to ask you about, and that is, of course, the operations, because whatever you're saying, it requires money. There's no doubt about it. So how do you get it, or how do you raise it, and you know, all those ramifications of finances? Sure.
Our administrative expenses, we try to keep it around 10%. The money needs to go back to the services that we provide on a daily basis. Clearly, from a federal and state level, the budgets are getting cut just because of what money is out there. So it really becomes incumbent upon us to be able to provide the service that we provide in the most cost-efficient manner that we can provide. So we are constantly evaluating staffing, level of staffing, types of programming that we're involved in, and how do we really do that in a way that still gets to our mission and the services that we are designed to provide.
I also ask this question of everybody too, is did you think when you started off that this is what you'd end up doing?
I absolutely did not. When I was in high school, I worked for my grandfather was Amendola and Sons, and I wheeled concrete at age 14 and thought that I probably would eventually get into that family business. And as I started getting into I started my professional career at Harbor Creek Youth Services. Was a great experience, and as I started doing this, I became really interested in getting more education, and so it really became incumbent upon me to go back to school, and then I became more involved in programming. I became interested in programming. So, but no, never thought I'd be doing what I'm doing today when I started.
How much education do you have?
I have a master's in social work from Case Western Reserve, licensed, practical social, licensed, certified social worker in Pennsylvania.
We go throughout all of Erie County. We're on YouTube, so it goes throughout the world, actually. If people want to do what you do need that level of education.
You do. It's required in my job, yes.
Yeah, okay. Again, this is Mark Amendola, and Mark Amendola is the Executive Director of Perseus House, and also he's in charge of the Charter School of Excellence. Let's go back to, again, the mission statement remains pretty fused to what you do. It varies very little. You're tied to that, which is necessary. People know who you are. They know the name. They know the good things that you are doing. And I'd like to go back to the 96 residential beds.
Sure.
Could you use 196 residential beds, do you think?
Not only this is a national trend in the state of Pennsylvania, beds have been reduced across the nation and across Pennsylvania, primarily for financial reasons, primarily to really manage the budgets. I think that we are, I mean, when I came to Perseus in 1994, there were 36 residential beds. We grew the program based on the need. We really were very cognizant of making sure we weren't duplicating something that somebody was already doing. So as the need expanded, we then replied to that. Quite honestly, I think right now we are where we probably will be. If you ask me where would we be in 10 years, we're probably right where we would be.
We've got about a minute left, and you've got it, so it's yours to wrap up and make your best pitch. You want to look in that camera right over there and just talk right directly to them?
Sure.
Or me, you take your choice.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we are Perseus House. You can come see us at perseushouse.org. If you are interested in any of our programming, it will have both the charter school and the residential program. You can also reach us at 814-480-5900, and we welcome donations. Unfortunately, those have squeezed down, but it also helps us from an operational point of view.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for the good work you do, too.
Thanks.
And of course, thank you to you for joining us today. I'm Phil Fatica. Until next time, take care.
You're watching the Millcreek Government Channel, powered by WQLN Public Media.